delighted to introduce my guest for today, who is Udbhash.
So it's pronounced as Udbhasan, but
Udbhasan.
in this part of the world, and even in back home, they call me UD. So that's the initials
UD.
of my name.
Okay. UD is not very difficult to remember. Can you hear UD?
Audible?
A little bit louder because we are also recording, so
Okay.
you might
great,
want to be a
great,
little
great.
bit louder.
I'll be a little bit louder.
Yeah? You can probably put the mic a little next to you, so easier.
Let's see. Should be better. Better now? Great.
Still slow? Still slow.
Let's see. I can bring this a little forward. Better now? Great.
So welcome, Mr. UD. UD is the Associate Vice President for First Gulf Bank and First Abu Dhabi Bank.
Right.
And is essentially someone who is a data scientist and a specialist in business analytics and plays with data to uncover insights for creating business value. I think that's what business analysts do.
That's what analytics is.
Yes.
At the end of that, you have to create some value which is tangible or intangible for the business you are in.
Right, right.
So a bit of introduction, maybe.
Please, yeah.
So I academically, I am an electronics engineer, and then 1 year of work experience in the IT industry, and moved on to pursue my MBA from IIM Indore. And after that, I have been closely associated with the UAE market. Started off as a consultant for different, banking entities within the region, and then from the last, 1.5 years, I've been with FAB, leading the practice of advanced analytics there. And as a practice, what we do essentially, correctly coined in, as you said, that we create value out of structured or unstructured data in a way which is, because all of you, I guess, are MBA students, so I will talk a little bit of business. So which creates a bit of, a direct or an indirect impact on the P&L of the bank, right? There has to be a journey between the insights that we create and the impact it creates on the P&L. It cannot be just academic exercise of building insights from the data. And we do this for the entire banking operation. So there's, in a regulatory practice that we are in, so there's compliance that we have to adhere to. There's marketing, because we have to increase our business. There is finance part of it, which takes care of whether the increment we are bringing in the business is actually profitable from a P&L perspective. So that kind of, a monetary, a check the finance puts on you. And there's the other functions of the bank, such as HR, there's IT. So you talk about analytics, you talk about data-driven insights, that we are everywhere within the bank. That's what we do as a function.
Excellent. So my first, these are, you're absolutely right, these are our MBA students, and we are studying, and almost all of them are working, are really trying to create impact within their own businesses. And a question that we ask often, I think, as business leaders as well as those who are engaging with the world of business, is how is technology going to disrupt the world of business, particularly in particular industries? I mean, I'll probably ask for the banking sector. How do you perceive technology impacting your industry in the next decade? What would be your predictions? And
Okay. Yeah. See, disruption, or I would say it's a collaboration, right? So it's a collaboration between how you used to do things while you are not in a very tech-oriented environment, versus now where we talk about AI, we talk about things like machine learning, we talk about things like deep learning. So how these things can rather not disrupt, but collaborate and, probably sink into the way of doing things. So, and the impact I see in the next 10 years is immense, because right now we know more about our customer than we used to do 5 years back, right? So a lot of the emphasis for now is to make the customer, understand the customer proactively rather than he coming in and pitching in for his needs. So understanding the demand side of things has become a lot more proactive in nature right now, rather than it was 5 years back. So we used to depend a lot on, let's say, inbound calls. We used to depend a lot of customers visiting our branches to opt for a certain product, to inquire about a certain service. We don't do that now. A major part of it has been made proactive, which is to say that we know you better than you do. And hence probably 30 days, 45 days before even you come in and approach me, I'm the one who is going to and telling you that, okay, there is this need which you have not identified now, but probably it's going to come up. So that's how important. So customer experience is one domain that I see where a lot of impact will be there in the coming years. And another area where probably data or machine learning or tech can do disruption is around how we calculate our profitability, or how we operate on the business finance side of things. So right now finance in this part of the world is not hugely dependent on tech. It's still operating on the older principles of accounting that, of course, you all have been aware. I see a lot of opportunity in that area as well when it comes to tech, or let's say data, or let's say machine learning, statistics.
Mhm. So you talked about the significant. I mean, it's almost like a break away from the past where we are moving away from products and services, a paradigm shift to experiences, right?
Correct, correct,
So
absolutely.
so in order to foresee that experience, I mean, we talk about things like design thinking. This is a design thinking class
Correct.
where we essentially talk about building that empathy, bringing that empathy mindset in order
Right,
to
right.
uncover the needs of the customers and then generating those insights.
Exactly.
So can you share with us as to how that plays out in the context of your organization? Not only customer empathy for the external stakeholders, but also how do you then build an organizational architecture to drive that empathy? So.
So I'll probably break this up into two parts. Let's talk about the internal stakeholders, and let's then talk about the end state end users who are our customers. So for the internal stakeholders, the kind of the landscape we operate in, right? So we are hugely dependent on the people who are exposed to the customers, right? Because we, as any analytics team for that matter, or any business analytics team, will again roll up to the business functions. And how do you interact with them and understand them is a key part of our own daily activity. And that's where design thinking comes in, that's where problem solving comes in. So for any small problem statement that we start off with, which can be solved through data, that the first part of this is entirely what are the first two principles of design thinking are, which is empathy and understand your customer, right? So understanding of the problem statement is key to, and I would say that probably 60 to 70% of the efforts in time as well as resources go into this phase, where we sit back with the stakeholders and we proactively also pitch in a lot of ideas, or a lot of areas where the end users or the business functions, they would not say that that's a problem. But we from our expertise, as well as the fact that we have done some analysis before even going into those sessions, so we pitch in and we say that, okay, these are the problems you might probably you're looking at. And then we talk about how do we solve them. So understanding the problem is, I would say, more important than even the solution part of things. That's what we operate, and that's I think, because all of us are from an MBA background. So consulting, as we say in the industry, right? So even if we are in a bank, but I think the starting steps are consulting, the basics of consulting. So
So if I mean this is very much aligned with what we've been discussing, and if you're essentially saying that the onus of responsibility then shifts to all the internal stakeholders to
correct,
develop that consultancy skills,
correct,
right?
correct.
So if you were to give some insights on how do you go about building that skills? What kind of talent do you attract to your to your business, and how do you hone their skills to be able to diagnose, to be able to listen, to be able to generally bring that level of empathy to every transaction? How do you build that capability? Is it
See,
something that you build over a number of time? I mean, do you hire people with that, or do they cultivate it over a period of time?
So I would say consulting requires a few basic skills, which is, of course, your ability to listen and then to articulate, right? And to hire, to coming to your question, do we hire somebody with that? We do not look for those skills, calling out those skills while we are sitting in as a hiring panel. But those are soft skills we're talking about, right? So at the end of the day, let's say I'm giving a simple case study to the incumbent in the interview, and the way he approaches the case study talks a lot more about whether these soft skills are there inside him or not. And these are something which can be honed and brought about just as a function of time. The only thing is, I mean, the incumbent has to be patient, and he has to have those senses open so that he's open to learning. That's all we look at, and if that clicks, that's a hire for us.
Moving on from there, now with every disruption, um, you're also trying to align your organizational architecture, right, in order to continue to drive your business deliverables. So, and that's a large process in itself. That's a every transformation essentially have got certain levers, which is leadership, the strategic alignment, and the cultural alignment. Uh, can you share with us from the perspective of your own organization, what are the current organizations doing within your industry to be able to continuously be agile and to be able to build an architecture that continuously changes, in alignment with whatever the transformative priorities are, right?
Right. Right. So I think a very uh, relatable example, maybe from the not from the industry, but something which we all have been exposed to, is something like an Uber, right? So when Uber came in, probably in this part of the world or even the subcontinent, uh, a lot of the taxi industry was being driven by taxi unions. So when Uber, or let's say something, even if you're from India, you would know, if something like an Ola came up, a lot of resistance was from the operators itself. Because when you talk about disruption, when you talk about transformation, there will be people who will be offended, but you're doing things from a greater good perspective, right? So you're doing things, you're investing in future. That's what, and you're breaking a simple problem, which is concentration of services, concentration of power. So you're decentralizing the entire structure, you're putting that power into the hands of common people, which is, as of now, the Uber operators, and you're putting a better service to the people. So I remember 5 years back, if I had to go to the airport to take a flight, I had to wait outside of my home, probably the area where there is a lot of concentration of taxis. I have to wait till a taxi rolled up. I negotiated with him on the price. So what Uber did is it broke the availability part of things. So right now it's just a matter of a click. A taxi arrives at your home. Second, it broke the price negotiation part, or the pricing part of the journey. It's standardized. You agree to it or you don't agree to it. Simple. It's binary. So that's how transformation or disruption works. And from the industry particularly, I see a very I don't know if you have been exposed to or not. Do you guys know about Mushrik Neo? Yeah, you know it, right? So what they did was they decentralized again the entire onboarding journey. So there were earlier what used to happen, or in many of the banks it still is, the onboarding, as we say, it's how the customer gets integrated within the business, right? So when a new customer comes in, how does the journey look like? A lot of it is paperwork right now. A lot of it is hard paperwork in terms of you have to give your Emirates ID, they have to get it validated, etc., etc. So they digitize the entire thing. They digitize the entire journey. You can open a bank account, you can put in funds at the convenience of your own home, sitting on your sofa. You don't need to visit a branch, you don't need to go to and speak to any of the agents. So that's how simple it is. And of course, when you talk about transformations again, so the people who are at, let's say, in charge of handling the earlier process, the legacy process, will always resist the change. So that's how transformation has been. But of course, I think organizations have now learned not to let go of the legacy people and to use their time more productively, which of course tech or data is saving. So for example, if I digitized a certain part of the journey, the amount of time I have saved for that guy who was doing the paperwork and all those checks, I'm using him more productively in other things. So I'm not letting him go. So I think we have struck that balance where we have created a win-win situation between the machine and the people.
That's really good to hear that, because the general perception is that
Yeah, AI will eat up jobs.
AI will eat up jobs. So,
Correct.
so that's my first question. To what extent do then, I mean, something that we discuss is that organizations also have a responsibility, leaders, for example, not only to increasing shareholder value, but also to look at all the stakeholder interests.
Correct.
And, and it's a paradox in many ways. So how do you balance the paradox, and what kind of systems and processes should you essentially be establishing within organizations to ensure that you are balancing that paradox of increasing shareholder value and also managing stakeholder
Yeah.
interests?
So I think to achieve a greater vision, of course, you have to have one synchronized, value stream created. For example, let's say at the end of the day, if I'm in a business of of banking, maybe of manufacturing, or even let's say the example of Uber, right? So I'm in a customer facing function where I have to create, for example, a better, business proposition for the customer. And at the end of the day, I have to make myself profitable. I cannot keep on burning cash just to achieve, the goal of making customers happy. So how do we do it? One simple strategy around is to create a value stream where you say that, okay, the end state is of course to make the customers happy, but let's also look at things from a cost perspective. And that's how I think one of the greats in the manufacturing industry is Toyota, right? So all of us know that probably 6 out of 10 cars in the Middle East, or even if you go in the subcontinent, you'll see these are Toyotas. Is Toyota a non-profitable company? No, right? So they are in the business of making customers happy. They have understood from, let's say, a manufacturing perspective, if I have to manufacture a car, what do the people need? And that's where, again, design thinking, the first two principles come in. What do you need? What's the problem statement? So if I have to go from point A to point B, I need a reliable car that starts. I need a car that takes me from point A to point B without any hassles. That's what Toyota has exactly done. And they have reached out to mass segment of customers. So they have a huge customer base and they are profitable in the journey. Now let's talk about the other players. Somebody like a Tesla, who is now concentrating on a very disruptive environment, which is around the EVs. Now, when EV comes in, will Toyota get disrupted? Now, I have a very strong view on this that they will not, because probably again from a layman consumer perspective, if you think about a car, right? So if now let's say we have two EVs, one from Toyota, one from Tesla, what do I choose? The mass segment will always go for a Toyota because they have built that sentiment, they have built that repute within their base, their customer base, right? So people know that if I take a Toyota, it's again gonna be reliable. It's a EV in the heart, that's fine, but at the end of the day, I need to go from point A to point B. And probably a Toyota can do it better than a Tesla. Again, you talk about, there are a lot of things like, for example, pricing. Let's say, just for hypothesis purpose, both are placed at the same price, but still I would say a mass segment of people would rely on a Toyota rather than a Tesla. And that's how you create a value stream, and you start you doing all your activities around the value stream, and I think at the long term you become profitable and you achieve your goal of serving your customers better.
So one of the questions that I often hear from young students is, how do you know that it is time for a transformation? Because many a time we find that organizations that have been extremely successful, they also
Right.
start in some ways they enter into the phase of codification.
Correct.
And all of those symptoms that we see of organizations that have been successful for too long, arrogance and some level of self-blindness, which also leads them to get out of the race, right?
Yeah.
So in order for an organization to understand that business disruption is around the corner,
Correct.
how would you prepare, in your role as a leader, how would
Correct.
you prepare this organization to continue to have that insight about things that are changing and continue to be alert with alert to the possibilities outside the organization.
So no, I think your question is first around the time, right?
Yeah.
When do you
Yeah.
realize? So I think a lot your end state balance sheet talks about when is the time for transformation. So to realize that, and I'm just stating facts here because again we are from the business background. So your P&L tells you, your cash flow statements tell you, your balance sheet tells you whether there is a need of transformation or not. And where do the transformations start from is again your problem solving tells you, and you dig down to understanding. Okay, now let's say my profitability is declining over the past couple of years or maybe 5 years at X% rate. I go and see whether my revenue has decreased or my costs have increased. Again, I find an answer. Okay, now let's say my revenue has decreased, right? My costs are what they used to look like 5 years back. What's the reason? Am I not onboarding new customers or am I losing customers from the portfolio? So all you do that problem solving journey, you do that simple exercise of finding out the root cause, and then you attack it from a transformation perspective. So again, if you have to probably fix the problem, you have to talk about a transformation. You have to change the things you used to do because suddenly that's not working out.
Yeah. So
So,
what would be these transformation levers from your perspective?
so because see, I come from a tech or a mixture of tech and a business background. So and in the recent years, what I've seen is tech has driven a lot of transformation because the reason primarily being is tech solves a lot of customer problems more easily than human or let's say a simple strategy perspective things can do. and but the thing is, see, tech cannot be operating in silo. Tech, the tech has to be married with the business strategy. And that's where okay, so coming to your second or the third question, how do we hire, right? So for us, then it becomes extremely important to value people who have this kind of a background, who have this kind of a knack to marry tech with business. So somebody a developer who can talk business, who can say that, okay, my piece of code solves XYZ problem, which creates an alpha, beta, gamma, impact on the PNL, who can entirely map the journey is somebody who is of value to me. And and as I said, so tech and business, they have to go hand in hand in this transformation journey. It cannot be a silo that tech only operates or owns the transformation. So tech has to be, in tandem with the business function.
This is a very important point. I mean, we are sitting in a classroom full of MBA students.
Yep.
And you're saying that, at the end of the day, you have to demystify technology in a way that technology is adding value to business,
Correct.
right? Technology in itself is not really
Correct.
so it's not really about the tools, it's not about the technology, it is how do you align technology for your strategic deliverables, right? So if you were talking, I mean, since this is a business a group of business students, what would be your advice to develop that understanding of being able to integrate some fundamental understanding of technology with strategic drivers and strategic outcomes?
So my layman advice would be to just keep your senses open, and see, we're in a certain time, and in the kind of window we are in, we are surrounded by tech which is creating an impact on the business. So if you just open, I think all of you have smartphones, and if you open your if you have an app of Amazon, and you open that and you see it's making recommendations for you even before you go and search the product. So how is this happening? So Amazon is in, let's say, the Amazon app, it's in the e-commerce industry. It's using very sophisticated deep learning algorithm to throw recommendations based on your lookalike people with the purchases that they have made. And it's intelligent to the fact that you're not getting disrupted, or you're not getting disturbed by the fact that the products that are getting recommended to you to some extent you realize that, okay, this might be of value to me. It might not be 100% accurate algorithm and say that, okay, this is the product I always needed, but you have that demand somewhere in your in your life. The other example is something is YouTube, right? So YouTube throws recommendations for all of you based on your watch history, based on the metadata that they collect, as they say, from other sources, what you do on the digital platforms, or what you do on your Facebook, what you do on your Insta, etc., etc. And that algorithm is pretty accurate, right? So many a 9 out of 10 times the video that comes to your path, you would open it and I mean, it would create a click, right? So that's how important tech is, and that's where you can keep your senses open to understand, okay, how is this happening, and why is this happening? The answer to the why is, of course, the business YouTube is in. So it's in the ad business. The more number of clicks, the more number of views you generate for YouTube, the more amount of money Google makes. Simple. And how is this happening? Then you go into the tech part of YouTube. So first, the why is very important, as to understand why is Google doing this. And then when you answer how is Google doing this, you understand the tech, you understand the algorithm.
Excellent. So, in your own journey as a leader, I mean, the last few years, the last couple of years in particular, have been hugely disruptive for almost all businesses. And even
COVID.
for us as individuals, I think it has given us increasing reflection points, right, on our
Right.
own leadership journeys. So, if you were to reflect on your own leadership journey, what have been your biggest lessons, leadership lessons?
Okay. The first lesson has been, of course, to change is the only constant. To adapt and to keep your views very open, very dynamic, and to not pivot to around a certain school of thought is something which I have learned. And probably I have operated in the way that I was very pivoted to a certain way of thinking, and that's what pardon me, but that's what probably the education system also teaches us.
Yeah.
Because I have my education system back from India, so that's what the legacy things taught me. But the more I underwent into the leadership journey or working with people, I realized that to change and to adapt to the ways, because at the end of the day, you can have 10 people around you, and nobody will be same. I mean, nobody will think, nobody will operate in a similar manner. You just have to bring out the best out of everybody. And I don't remember who told this, but it's a very nice line. He said that you're only as strong as the weakest link in your team, right? So the moment and the time you start realizing this, I mean, you make things work.
Excellent. So another follow-up question on that: how do you prepare yourself for the journey? Something that has come up so much more is the importance of being centered as a leader, because we are so surrounded by change, as you say. Yes, one is change readiness, which you're talking about, but because the world out there is so ambiguous and the pressures are changing at such an exponential, the things are changing at such an exponential pace. Successful or impactful leaders might also be those who are having a strong core but still showing that level of agility.
Correct.
Right? Would you believe in something like that? And if so, how do you prepare yourself to again balance that paradox of, being deeply reflective, but at the same time being able to go out there and start experimenting and take risks? How do you strike that balance? How important it is to strike that balance?
See, I think very correctly you have mentioned that at the core there are certain values which are same irrespective of the amount of change we see on the exterior, right? Let's say something like COVID. Now, COVID didn't change anything for us. It made us realize the value system. It made us realize things which people or consumers wanted, but they never came up to us. Correct. So we all wanted apps like Zomato to deliver us food to our homes. We all wanted convenience. So what we wanted was the value for our time, right? So the amount of time I'm wasting to go out to a shop and get my grocery, I want to save that. So probably time is something at the very crux which all of us wanted to for all of the companies to value, and we just realized it. So it was always there. We never, it was not way too high in the value chain of things. Probably it repositioned itself at the very top once COVID hit us. And we realized it and we actioned upon it. I mean, all of the companies in all of the major industries, they did it. And as of now, whichever company you see is doing good, they all realigned their business strategy after COVID struck. So that, I mean, see, at the crux, it was time, but the realization was probably the thing that changed at the exterior. So yeah, whenever these things happen, whenever these kind of disruptions they occur in the industry, it takes time for companies to realign their strategies. But the successful ones are who do it at the very moment and who are quick enough to change, adapt to these changes.
One last question before I open it out to this group of lovely colleagues here. Um, Cybersecurity is something
Right.
that is really impacting all businesses, and we are all thinking about how do we protect our data, for example, right? So, what is the kind of risk that you see when you look at your own industry, and what are the kind of governance issues? How are you protecting yourself against cybersecurity risk?
Hmm. See, because we're in, I mean, we are a bank and we are entirely dictated by the GDP, GDFR or PCI DSS and all the central bank guidelines. So there is a set of guidelines we have to follow by the book, and there is something we also proactively do, which we understand from our own expertise, what is important to safeguard from a consumer perspective. And well, there are n number of things to do about it, but the some important measures are how well defined. For example, we all talk about cloud infrastructure nowadays. We all talk about doing analytics on cloud. We all
Yeah.
talk about storing data on cloud,
Yeah.
because of cloud has its own XYZ pros and cons. But of course, how do you secure it in a way that, okay, something, if I talk tech here, it's something called a private cloud, right? Which is to say that, okay, nobody else has access to that barrier that I've created. And this is just a small example. And of course, as I said, guidelines are there in terms of we have to be compliant to those guidelines. And then proactively, these are things that we do to protect the sentiment of the consumer.
Any last words of wisdom for all our colleagues here?
Uh, I would say, see, as I said, you're in the line of business, and probably all of you would roll up to some leadership function in your careers. The only thing is, first, be very agile to the way you think. Do not be pivoted around a certain school of thought, because you have n number of examples. The best part, and you're very lucky to get these examples, because I think in your is this a 2-year course, or
Yeah.
it's a 2-year course, right?
Yeah.
So in your 2 years you might have gone through n number of case studies, right? You have solved case studies, you've read about cases, and one of the cases I think most of the business schools cover is something like a Xerox.
Yeah.
Correct. So how does a leader in the industry go down just because they pivoted on a certain school of thought, right? And why does Canon, vis-a-vis you have a Canon, who used to sell pinhole cameras to DSLRs, to now selling digital, to operating in the digital world. So how are these two companies poised, and what went wrong with Xerox and what didn't went wrong for Canon? So these are just small examples. So reflect on those examples and try to understand at the very crux that we are only talking about companies, we're only talking about ideas that are susceptible to change. So the ideas that are very, I would say flexible to change, are the ones which are champion as of today, and the ideas which were not are probably not in your list right now. So be agile, do not pivot. And the second thing is around, once you roll up to leadership function, your key assets will be your people. So we might talk tech, we might talk about disruptions, we might talk about AI, robots, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, for any company or any business, the key asset is always the human resource. So learn to value the human resources that you have, and as I said, you can be only as strong as the weakest link in your team. So just be ready for the fact that not everybody will be at the same level, but again, everybody has their own pros and cons. Your job as a leader is to focus on the pros and try to ignore the cons.